My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40-plus Gay Man Gay Talk. And we're going to talk about something that always causes some explosions, but we're talking about a new book that literally just came out from one of the authors I really enjoyed talking to over the years, and not just because of his own stuff, but where he came from. But also, I love this subject matter. I know you're going, okay, get on with it, Rick. What's the subject matter? Well, we're going to talk about what is it like if in your own life you ended up in a little party of three. Yes, I'm talking about those triads, those Throuples, all that sort of stuff. The good, the bad, the ugly. But today's author, C. Travis Rice, has brought his own book called Party of Three to the world. And it's a cool fictional exploration, probably embedded in some real life stuff around what is it like when you live in the world of the Throuple. So, C. Travis Rice, welcome, buddy. It's been a while.
Thank you for having me back. Yeah, I think
of course. I was going to say I think it's been a year, and you know, hey guys, just if you're watching this on YouTube, like there's the cover. That would be enough for you to go, okay, I think I'm going to at least pick it up and go peruse it, right? So nothing like recording something you're like, okay, that's tasty. Now I won't be able to focus the rest of the freaking day. But
yeah, that's the objective. Yeah,
there you go. That is the objective. So. You kind of set yourself up for that question. So what was the objective around this one? I know it's a series, so let's set that tone. It's a series of 5, right? Books?
Yes, it's a series. I think we're up to, no, I've done 4 novels. I plan to do a 5th novel in the series. It's kind of the last novel in the Sapphire Cove world that I'm thinking of doing. It's the last character whose love story I want to tell, which is Jonas, who's been a recurring character in the earlier books. But the Party of Three is part of what I'm calling a sub-series. You know, there's a long tradition in romance writing outside of gay romance. Well, actually, it isn't that long because people started experimenting with it when digital publishing became a thing and they didn't have to spend the money to distribute and print something that was shorter and had a lower price point, which is the novella. Yep. And so romance writers started putting out these novellas in their world that were kind of stood on their own, but were nice little samplers for people who were maybe on the fence about entering a bigger sort of series universe.
Yep.
And I very much wanted to do that with Sapphire Cove. And I wanted it to be hot. I wanted the novellas to be spicy. There's plenty of really explicit love scenes in the novels, but there's a lot of plot. They're very soapy. And they each sort of tackle a different issue. So when it comes to the novellas and keeping that focus on the spice, my plan, if there's going to be more, is they're going to focus on kind of taboo or unconventional relationship structures. And this one, as you said, is a throuple. But that said, there's a pretty big tradition now of doing what is often called menage romance. And it was a big thing when I first started sticking my toes in the romance writing waters back in around 2014, I think it was. And it was a way that romance was getting more queer because there were a lot of female writers there. There was the romance thing was happening, which we talked about last time I was on, which is provocative and controversial for people, which is it's a lot of female writers writing to men falling in love for an audience largely of women. I've traveled a journey with it. In the beginning, I was suspicious. I now think it's kind of great. And there has increasingly been more of a space in there for men who want to read the stories and write the stories. So that's the backstory. But in the beginning, in 2014, when I was sort of peering around the fence at what was going on in this sort of ebook-driven romance world, a lot of these women had a fantasy about joining in a throuple with 2 men who were also with each other. So it was very bisexual, pansexual, really.
Right.
And I thought, and it was actually the first romance novella I ever wrote followed that construction. And it was a Christopher Rice book. C. Travis Rice is really a pen name that promises you it's going to be boys. It's all
Right.
boys, including.
You should just put that on the
yeah.
cover. See Travis Rice in parentheses, all boys, all,
All
boys,
boys.
all boys, right?
All boys, yeah, including trans men. I haven't gotten there yet, but that I include them in my definition of boys. But this other thing, this Menage thing that was happening, was different, and I thought, wow. And so the letter coding was, if you saw it advertised as MMF, it meant the men touched. They were
Yes.
also. If it was MFM, if the F was in between the two men, that meant they were just about her. And so I had a lot of disappointing reading experiences where I didn't read the fine print closely enough. And I was like, they're never going to touch. Or they were brothers and not in that kind of carnal plus way. They were brothers in the sort of whatever. So there was a long tradition of this. But when I got to it with this book, I wanted to deal with I've never been in a throuple. There was an attempt at one when I was younger, and one of the guys was like, "I can't do it," but it left me with this sense of what would have needed to happen for it to work, and I put that into this story. And I think part of it is, for me at least, the character of Buckley, who's kind of the nexus who brings the other two together. He's really polyamorous, and what that means is, not necessarily that he wants to actually have sex with a bunch of people, but that when he falls in love with his boyfriend, he's incredibly excited by the idea of his boyfriend being with anyone. He says, I feel so connected to you that I think the technical term that polyamorous people use is, I'm going to get it wrong, compersion. Compersion is when, right, they know that their partner is going across town and they become, rather than, he doesn't experience jealousy in that way. And so he's on this journey of thinking, well, I finally met the man who I think is right for me, so I assumed these feelings would go away. They haven't gone away. I don't know what that means. On top of that, my man's got a man from his past that he could never fully be with because they're not entirely sexually compatible. Yeah. So, but here I am, this joyful power bottom in the middle. Right. So it's like it was about assembling all these pieces so that they fell into place at the right time, so all three of these people could get with it. And I think the obstacle is that, and I always love including this because I am usually in romance spaces the older grumpy guy in the room, but the older grumpy guy is the one who's has the most resistance. The younger guys are all in, but he's the older guy. He's in his 40s. He's been single a long time. He's like, I'm just going to end up raining on the parade of these two beautiful young people. And it's his negative self-talk, I think, because he hails from an older generation than either of them. And he did have it tougher in many respects as a gay man. He's the one who has the bigger hump to get over.
I love this because it's actually real life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happening. And there's going to be guys listening to this like, yeah, I know. I could never do a throuple, or it came close, but then there, and there's always, not always, but the majority of the time there is one that's somewhat of the holdout. They're kind of in, but they're in with caution, right?
Right.
And I've coached people through this. I've experienced it in my own world. I've watched it work really well with people. I've watched it demolish relationships with people. And I think the interesting piece of it being in the fantasy romance novel space is it gives people the ability to go, okay, this may sound like fantasy romance, but it's actually a lot of real life. A lot of this is actually what's actually happening. And I loved how you describe like, the MMF and the FMM. I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, lesbians are the first ones who will tell you, not all lesbians. Okay, we're going to go there. But a lot of them are like, they love watching gay male porn. Yeah. It's, and so that really is a mind fuck for a lot of people. Like, wait, we don't understand that.
Right.
But I think it's all about realizing we are all, even those who say they're not, we're probably all more polyamorous than we ever want to admit.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because I think this is the doorway that keeps trying to get shut by the world, by society. Like, no, you either have to be over here or over here. No, there is no over here or over here. And I think for me, I'm just going to comment from my own perspective in the world. At 61 years old, I really realized that going into my early 50s and approaching the later 50s, like, wait, I love my husband. We'll be 25 years together next year. So
Mhm.
there is no doubt that this is like a thing that really works. But I also love a lot of the other stuff that could potentially happen. And it's not like we're done. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I think most people haven't let themselves go explore their sexual fantasy, ideation, all that sort of stuff, and how healthy it can actually be individually or in a couple.
Yeah, I think it is fascinating because it's there's an aspect to this which is like you said, it's a romance with a happy ending. Romance novels, they promise a happy ending, so I'm going to work this out. If you go in with me, I'm working it out. But I do put a lot in there of what I've observed, of what I've
Mm-hmm.
experienced, and my personal journey is that I've had very few serious relationships, and a lot of people who know me well, whose point of view I trust, said my mother said to me towards the end of her life, Christopher, you're a bachelor. I've seen you. You develop very close friendships, but you don't ultimately want another person in your space for very long. My best friend Eric Charquin, who I do a podcast with over at the Dinner Party Show, and we run a production company together. The joke of him is that my perfect man will turn into an end table when we're done having sex, so I can put my drink on him. It's a pretty rough thing to say, but it's the people
that's
who
a
know
visual
you,
right there. That's just a
yeah.
whole visual, right?
Right, it is,
But I
and
love
it
it.
could be a romance. End table shifters. We've got werewolf
Right.
shifters and cougar shifters.
That's a whole like line of furniture you just could
Yeah,
develop.
absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds very AI. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But
Exactly.
the point really is that in my own when I was young and I was writing a column for the Advocate, I was in a relationship and we were monogamous. I think I was, and I wrote this fiery column about I can't. What was it? I can't take to the open seas with a man if I'm going back to the pond with a stranger I met 5 minutes ago. All that sort of stuff. And there's enough time between me and that column for me to realize that the more you get to know yourself and the more you get to know what a relationship is and isn't, and what sex is and isn't, I think the older you get, the more you realize that there is something you share with a partner that is beyond sex.
Yep.
And I've never had to really test that because I've never been in a relationship where we've decided to open up. I've been in relationships where maybe that would have saved it, but it didn't feel right. I think it has to feel right to both people based on what I've heard. So anyway, this is a long, convoluted answer, but I think the thing that is interesting to me about the romance writing side of this is I have never seen, and I don't know if you could get it past the critics and the bloggers and the romance fan social media folks, a truly open relationship romance. I don't know if I've ever truly seen, because these three guys, they decide I think by the end of the story, you have a sense that Buckley would be down for whatever. If his boyfriends were happy, he would be happy. Bring in a soccer team, whatever. Buckley
Right.
is a totally free spirit. But one of them says, in order for me to be in this, we need to be closed. The three of us, we need to be closed. And so they all agree, and that's the agreement they make. And I think if they were not to make that agreement, I would have 1-star Goodreads reviews popping up, because that would, in the view of so much of the readership, violate the rules of a romance. You can have three,
Yeah.
you can have four, you can have whatever, but they ultimately need to
But
make
there has
this
to
sort of
be this
exclusive commitment.
container. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's an interesting piece too, because I have worked with some couples in this space, and okay, we've got this third that we're bringing in. It's almost like, here, a third of a cup of this is coming in. It's like, really,
Yeah.
call it like that. But it is true, because there's this dynamic. Okay, you're bringing this into an existing, relationship, a state of being.
Right.
Yet, the thing that almost always is, quote, missing is that next piece. Okay, so are we going to all stay monogamous in the triad? Are we not? And again, this is where you get in the messy middle. No pun intended there, guys. I mean, it's okay to be messy middle and be covered in, body fluids, but it is a really difficult thing, because any relationship, even the relationship of podcast host to podcast guest, there's kind of here's the structure we're working within, right? but it's been discussed. I told Christopher before we even got on, I'm like, you got 5 minutes to talk. I'm kidding, of course, guys. I would never cut Christopher off in 5 minutes to save my life, because we have such good conversations. But it's really truly that, if you don't create the containers to make this work. And I remember the first time I experienced compersion in my own relationship, I'm like, it's actually kind of a turn on to think about, oh, this is what I want to see happen. I want this to happen.
Right.
And I was like, but how do I say that? I became little Ricky all over again. And I hate that. That's my name. Well, it is Ricky, but it's like, oh, the little boy saying like, oh, but that's scary. He's mine. He's my, and the other side's like, this is pretty hot.
I know. Right. And because it's not about a fear of the thing happening. It's about a fear of what could happen as a result of the thing happening, right? Like, I am incredibly aroused by the idea of my boyfriend being with another guy. I'm afraid he's going to leave me for that guy entirely. That's the fear, right? That you're protecting it. But if that fear is removed, if you trust that person enough, that's interesting. That said, all of my close friends who know me really well say to me, you should never do this. You are a completely spoiled only child. You don't even share dessert. What are you talking about? How could you think you're this person? And there may be a lot of truth to that, but I will tell you, like, when I did get in relationships with people, and once we were over that sort of initial, like maybe we made a commitment, I loved hearing about their sexual history. I loved it. I thought it was so hot to hear about their past. And I loved hearing about what kind of porn they wanted to watch. I loved getting, because that was a part of who they were. And I never wanted to pretend that they had never been with anybody before they got to me. I mean, how absurd. Unless you're dating, I don't know, someone you shouldn't be dating.
But I think there's something interesting here. And I don't know why this just popped into my head as you were saying it. But even back in the day when you were, when your amazing mom was still walking the planet and all her legacy lives on, there was always an edge to like dipping into this realm in a little bit, but it was like almost like let the reader take the fantasy to where they want to. And I love that you've taken and built off of, well, first of all, you've carved your own path, beyond who she was. So guys, Anne Rice, that's his mom. Let's just go there. But what I love is you're like, okay, it's one thing to take romance fantasy and stop it there. You're actually like, we're going romance fantasy reality, and here's what it can look like. There's like, here, I'm bringing this triad thing. And I love that Buckley is the one that's like the really free spirit, because it's so interesting to be with somebody who's like that. Right. And to see like, if one part of the triad is like, oh, I could see kind of latching on and letting that feed my soul, and the other part's like, oh, I couldn't do that. It all becomes this beautiful psychological dynamic of who we are as humans. And then to let that all be played out in, not just in the bedroom, but like in the day-to-day roles and all this. One of my other friends who's also been a guest on this podcast is in a triad. And it's always fantasy. Well, it's a fantasy to me. Like, oh, they're all really hot. But it's always interesting to see like how that gets played out in the social media world, because sometimes it's the three of them, other times it's the two of them, other times it's not the two of them, it could be the third and the husband. And I just find it really fascinating, and I go, okay, why is that so fascinating to me, and where does it trigger? It doesn't trigger me, but it's a fascination to me. It's like, oh wow, this is somebody, they seem to be really in touch with themselves. And I think by doing what you've done with like these books in this series, it's like you're inviting people to go deeper into themselves and ask the deeper questions, even if it is in the realm of fantasy romance. It's like, ooh, here's the deeper questions.
Right. And I think it's because these characters have to answer the question, what am I afraid of about this construct? I love everything else about it, but what are my fears? And I think because of the structure of this book, it being a novella and being kind of, in a structural sense at least, modeled after the old Harlequin category romances that you'd see. They were shorter, and they were little paperbacks, and they followed a formula. We're going to give you a story in this many beats, happy ending, a lot of emotion, a lot of spice. So there's not a lot of time for them to hesitate in a story structure like that. They've got to get right to it. And I think I wanted the godlike author side of me was trapping them in a hotel room together. They're not really trapped. They just can't bring themselves to leave because when you've had a hot experience like this, you don't want to walk away from it right away because then you have to think about it. Then you have to pick it apart, all that sort of stuff. So as a writer, you can use all those things to channel your characters into dealing with the stuff that I think most people would have to deal with if they were going to do something like this. They have to talk about what are they afraid of? Eric Shaw Quinn, who I mentioned earlier, my best friend, he always says the problem in a relationship is not what's being said, it's what's not being said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. It's interesting that you bring that up. I was working with a client of mine, this has been 3-4 months ago, who was trying to navigate this whole throuple thing.
Right.
And I said, so, well, how do you know when it's not working? I said, let's just go there. I said, just give me an example of when you know it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, oh, that's easy. I'm like, okay. He goes, if we've just had a sexual experience in the throuple and we get done, everybody's had their money shot, and whoever gets up first, like if it happens, like everything's done and whoever stands up immediately and go, oh, let's get cleaned up, I mean, something didn't work. I said, are you sure about that? And he goes, yes, because he goes, my husband and I, and so their third wasn't living with them, just, but it was starting to march that direction. And that was where the tension was starting. Like, okay, well, what happens, if this guy moves in with us and all the questions, well, do we all sleep together? I'm like, hell no. Even when we've had that, I'm like, no, you still have, your bedroom is over there because I can't sleep with 3 people in the bed. Ain't gonna happen, right? But he said, yes, it's kind of an indicator for us. Like if I get up and it's immediate, something wasn't right. I said, well, is it just with this guy or has this been kind of the pattern? He goes, no. This is actually how we started to figure out what can make it really work for us. Because if after the afterglow, so to speak, nobody got up and nobody went to go, get away, then something really worked. So, well, it's not always going to be, roses and unicorns, man. He goes, no. But he goes, there is this, he goes, even when it's been good, but like we don't rush out of it. He goes, there's a hesitancy to get up. And I said, okay, so now where else does this show up? And he goes, oh, like, when my husband would come home and me and the boyfriend were, hanging out, if we got the brush off from my husband immediately when he walked in, that meant my husband was like, I'm really not into like the 3 of us being together tonight. I said, but did he ever say that? And to your point, your friend's point, Eric, he goes, no, that's when we realized there was problems because we weren't having these conversations. And then the conversations that weren't being had as a couple, not the throuple, as a couple, were started being had with the throuple. Right. So it's like here, the couple, one person in the couple's having these conversations with the throuple, but they're not having it with the person who instigated the whole relationship long time ago. Yeah. And so that's when we started to unravel, Christopher, is like, oh, these were signs that were like, this isn't working. And that's, we actually got them to the point where like, oh, this guy isn't for us, because they finally started talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
But it all started with the little like escape out of the bed after a really great sex session. Like, oh, quick escape, something's not working.
I think the other side of it too, and I think this can be addressed through talk as well, the power dynamics at play, because I'm out here in Hollywood and it's very common to see an older, successful couple take in a younger guy who's kind of new to town, and it's maybe not sex work specifically, but there's an understanding that he will be housed, and I call it the houseboy model. I don't know if that term the young people even know it, but it was, it was a running joke when I was a new baby gay that older couples would hire a houseboy and have fun with him. That's not necessarily the type of throuple we're talking about. Right. I think everybody should be in the relationship that they want, but I think there needs to be a really clear set of understandings and something like that, because what that means is you've got 2 people who can throw out the disadvantaged one at any time with no consequence to themselves and no real obligation to the other person. And that can breed real fear and imbalance in a relationship. And I think in this story, these guys are all sort of on the same plane financially in their lives. And when they do come together, they're able to make choices from the same place of sort of financial advantage, if you will. They're not all rich, but they're all sort of, nobody is footing all the bills for everybody else and holds those strings. But those are the problems in any relationship. I think that's the
Absolutely.
thing. And I speak not as an expert on any of this, but if you struggle, whatever you struggle with about having one boyfriend, you'll probably struggle with the same things having two boyfriends. Like, and I guess the thing that I would be most on guard about in my own life is using it as a band-aid
Yep.
for issues that have not been addressed in the sort of beginning relationship. But I do know people where that was what I thought was going on with friends, and it's not the case. And they've been in a throuple for 20, 30 years. And, they have, but a lot of those, I also see an age gap that isn't necessarily a power differential.
Yep.
Like they're not necessarily rich older men,
Right.
but they are older men, and they do take, and this seems to become an engine of the relationship, they take a mentory attitude towards the younger guy. And I don't begrudge anybody that. And I think that's really hot. Age gap romance is a huge genre. And I think some of it is about longing for the comfort and stability of somebody who is a bit more settled, who can sort of embrace your youthful, emotional, erratic nature,
Yep.
and maybe tells you to sit down and calm down now and then. So all of that can be fun. But I think, like I said, the most important thing is that believing that you're not going to have the same issues you had with your first boyfriend that you'll have with the second one, just because you're doing this exciting new sexual thing. That seems like a danger zone.
Well, it's like if you bring your same old garbage from your last relationship into your next relationship, the pattern's going to get repeated. If you don't work on what it is, even if you don't feel like you're the one who had to work on something, guess what? There's something you contributed to whatever happened. Yes, you could be with the worst narcissist in the world, but you allowed that narcissist to be narcissistic to you. So you need to really step out and look at self in that way. We're not going to go overanalyze that, but I think it's really important to say those sort of things because, again, here's where a book like yours can open the doorway and hopefully help somebody go, okay, I know it's fantasy, but it gave me some things to think about. It gave me some things to think about. How would I do this? What maybe you read something in the book about Buckley or whomever, and you're like, oh, I don't know that I would do it that way. Well, good. Then at least you thought about this, because if you're considering going then this path, it's like talking about getting married. I remember back in the day when, marriage equality was like the big, like, it's not going to happen. It is going to happen. It was on for a bit in California, then it was gone and everything. Suddenly everybody was on the bandwagon. Oh, you just need to be on this and get married. And I was one of the, I was on the opposition, not because I didn't want to be married. Okay. That wasn't the opposition. The opposition was, you don't get to dictate to the rest of the gay population, LGBTQ population, that they should get married, because my friend Christopher is a lifelong bachelor. I'm going to pick up from what your mom said. Okay.
Right.
I actually think that's actually very healthy. In fact, I put in the same genre and category as couples who choose not to have children. That's what works best for them. Right. And the moment we overlay our, experience or whatever, and my husband and I didn't get married. We did not get married at first. And then we kind of got married for the money, so to speak.
Well, right.
And you would be better off being married. And
that's what it was about. That was what marriage equality was really about. I mean, we can talk about the cultural things, and I think those are important but it was about people having the option. We deserve to have the option, even if we weren't going to take it. And I think you're right. It's interesting. I read a lot of history. I think right now I find not ancient history, but early American history, particularly about the Wild West, because I have a total cowboy fetish, but that's the superficial reason.
Okay, there we go, boys. True confessions from a novelist, right there.
I'm a cowboy. I can't believe I haven't written a cowboy book yet, but I will.
Well, you just have to come to San Luis Obispo then. I'll tell you when Cal Poly's Cowboy Weekend is, when they have the rodeo. I'll just let you know, man.
I love it up there at the beginning. So if I can stay for the weekend in Cambria and then come see hot cowboys, that's like my perfect weekend.
There you go.
That imperative, I was reading about early American gay history, which we know almost nothing about, but we know that men like us existed and were writing each other letters and coded letters and were arrested and sometimes executed. But there was this enormous pressure to get married because they had to populate the colonies. Like, it was very primal. It wasn't purely religious. And a lot of people are still stuck in that old model. They say that most of the problems are about using yesterday's tools for today's problems, that we simply must get married. Because I feel like what that argument turned into, whether you were gay or straight or whatever, was that a man was not fully developed or was dangerous to
Yep.
society if he was a rogue outside of a relationship. And I think there's a lot of the manosphere has picked up that thinking. A lot of the sort of anti-porn movement is about that. You're wasting energy. And it feels very primitive to me because I truly believe that so many of the problems that a lot of men have is that they have been told they have to shoehorn themselves into a relationship construct that's not right for them, a sexual orientation that's not theirs. All these sort of things are about pressing and corralling men into these boxes. And I think the ones who force themselves into the worst box for them often lose their minds and can be very dangerous. I think it's the opposite for me. And I think you're right. I think that there can be a certain level of mental health if you decide that the solo life is right for you.
Yep.
And I think it is about, like you were saying, letting everybody find their own way, but making sure that the legal recognition is there if people want to make that choice. That was so I had great respect for people who said, I support gay marriage rights and will never be in one. You know, and I was like, yes, absolutely. Like, you know, I think that it's interesting to explore that in the fictional realm because I think that the promise of these books or a book like this that's marketed in this way is I am going to get people together. But the more I get these characters together, the more I get to think about what it would take to get me in a relationship at this point, 47 years old, right? I enjoy my life. I say things like Whoopi Goldberg, I'm single because I don't want anyone in my house, you know. But what would it take if I really sit down and try to write the man who could get me over those humps and not just have him be Tom Holland on a break from shooting Spider-Man
or a cowboy or a cowboy
or all the Bellamy boys and a cowboy who want me to teach them writing. You know, like all that sort of stuff. It's a fascinating exercise, but it doesn't diminish where I am. And I do have friends, people I love very much in my life who always ask after my relationship status as if they're asking me how my chemo is going. You know what I mean? Like, have you met anyone yet? And it was like, yeah, I've met a lot of people. I'm not in a committed relationship with any of them, you know, and they clearly feel that I'm going to be lost and incomplete until I'm in a relationship. And I have had to train myself to hear that they're saying this is their way of showing love, that they're not judging me, you know. But in those moments, I really do feel this absence. I used to feel a sense of panic and anxiety about it. Like it was a thing on a list I had to check. If I didn't have a boyfriend, my life was incomplete. Wasn't going to do it. It was an obsession for me for many years. And then I just kind of let it go. I really did, because I looked at my history and said, well, it was Eric who pointed out to me, he said, you are the most unhappy when you were in a relationship. I've known you for going on 25 years now. And when you are in a relationship, you are the most stressed out, freaked out, anxious, worried, you know. And you could say maybe because none of those were the right relationships, but I don't believe in a relationship fixing you. You know what I mean? I think that you bring to a relationship where you are at that point in your life. And if you haven't taken a good hard look at where you are and what you're dealing with, the relationship isn't going to change anything. So, you know, it's a lot.
But that's part of letting you be you.
Yeah.
And it's always so interesting to me because when I see this happening in our own LGBTQ community, I'm like, wait. Time out, folks. The whole reason we come out of the closet is because we want to be our most authentic us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if Christopher's most authentic him is not being in a relationship and he's happiest in that, let him be that.
Yeah.
It's that simple. It was so funny. We spent the weekend with our oldest daughter and her husband, and love her to death. She's our planner daughter. And so they got married last year. And I just know she's got the plan, like, you know, and one little conversation came up about, you know, kids. I don't care if they have kids. I would love to be a grandfather, but I'm like, oh no, you got to have a grandkid. No, I'm not that. I will never be that helicopter grandparent.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, if anybody knew the plan, then I have to put up with everybody going, so are you? And she goes, I don't want that pressure. And I thought it's so interesting what you just said, because it was a similar thing. It's like this pressure to have somebody be in a relationship, to have kids, to do this thing, to do, just let people live life in their own way. And
Yeah,
that's where
absolutely.
the beauty comes in. And if if a throuple is your own way, then let somebody do it. If it's not for you, then don't. It's kind of like these people who are like, oh, abortion. I'm like, if you don't want to have an abortion, then don't get one. It's really that simple, folks.
Yeah. I like, and Eric Charquin, again, I always quote him, don't tell me how to be gay.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me how to be gay. That's what he said. And that made it one of my slogans. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think we often apply that to, don't tell me what type of sex to have or what type of relationship. But as we've established, it also means I'm fine in no relationship.
Mm-hmm. I just recorded a video for Instagram that was like, stop shaming the sexually active. They're not sluts. They're just sexually active. I know it's gonna get pushback, but that's what I love. I love stirring up. So
good. Then you're who social media was made for. Yeah.
And not a lot, but every once in a while it's like, okay, I know I'm going here, and this is going to be the one. This is going to be the one.
It's called engagement. That's
yes,
the buzzword,
I am building, and it's actually one of my listeners of the podcast, and now he's turned into a really good friend. He goes, "You haven't stirred up the shit in a while, Rick. You need to stir the pot. It's time to stir the pot." And he always will have some really, because he lives in Atlanta. He's very. I'm not. You know where I live, San Luis Obispo. There's no. We're not the heartbeat of gay culture. Let's just go there, right? By any stretch of the imagination. I love it. Because,
nor are you Denton, Texas.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's still California.
There's still enough San Francisco, LA people come here. Blows the population for a weekend, and then
big university, got a big college there. Yeah,
but it is very interesting when you see that, and he'll send me something because he lives in Atlanta. He's in Hotlanta. He's like, here, I think this is something you should talk about. I'm like, okay, thanks, girlfriend. We'll get right on that one. So well, Christopher, again, congrats on the next book. I know there's another one coming. It's always good to talk to you, man. And
it's great.
I appreciate you just taking stuff that's, again, fantasy, romance, but it's real life based, and making people enjoy it, and also going, do the little church lady head tilt.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about
plan.
So anyway,
that's great.
All right, and wherever you want to find him, you're going to see it everywhere. It's going to be on every book retailer you can find. Again, The Party of Three by C. Travis Rice. Don't necessarily look up Christopher Rice. Look at C. Travis Rice. You'll find it really quickly. And wishing you all the success, man. And the invitation is now open when book number 5 rolls out about the Cove, where we'll have another conversation, because we always turn it into something really helpful here. So,
absolutely. Thank you.
All right, bro. Thank you so much. And thanks, guys, for being listeners. Go out, have a great week. And, if a throuple is up your alley, you might just want to read the book, get a little bit of insights, like what could possibly be one of the ways it works. So anyway, guys, have a great week. Take care. And we'll be back in just another week with another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.